violence closes down participation to some extent, creates boundaries, barriers, etc., closes space for interaction. But on the other hand, it often foments participation. People try, actually, to deal with the violence, address the violence, and we're very interested in this relationship between violence and participation, and whether or not you can really talk about citizenship in some parts of the world today when so many people live in contexts of chronic violence, or they're living the legacy of eruptions of violence, or they're living in post-war situations.
In 2006, researchers from the Violence, Participation and Citizenship Group met in Nigeria. There they discussed how they could combine a range of qualitative and quantitative methodologies to understand and to help overcome the root causes of violence. They also learned about participatory video as a methodology. This video will look at 3 participatory research projects occurring since then in countries experiencing different kinds of violence: Nigeria, Brazil, and Mexico. In Nigeria, clashes between ethnic and religious groups have killed thousands and left millions displaced. Attacks are commonly committed by mobs, which are often comprised of former victims in a perpetuating cycle of violence.
The violence erupted and we broke from the field and went back to Zaria. 2 weeks later, when we came back to Kabala to continue the work, 3 of the young men we were working with had been killed.
In the slums, or favelas, of Rio de Janeiro, residents are caught in the crossfire. Drug traffickers control these parts of the city, though they must defend their territory from the police and the militias, which are vigilante gangs of off-duty police, firemen, and prison guards. All these groups use violent and repressive tactics.
One of them described an incident where a person who'd gone against the drug traffickers was led into a street in the middle of the community and tied up and had tires put all over his body and was burned alive in the middle of the street.
In southern Mexico, indigenous groups living in the states of Guerrero and Chiapas experience a myriad of violence. Women and children face daily threats. Communities clash over politics, natural resources, or other interests. And as a group, indigenous people confront what they term structural violence.
It is a kind of a structural situation that reproduces their poverty and their exclusion, and there are not clear policies oriented to solve their situation and to guarantee the right, in this case, the right to health and the right to a non-violent life.
We weren't just gathering data about violence. We as a group felt that we should use the research to encourage people to think about how to act to diminish the violence or open space, burst open these closed spaces that violence often brings about. We were very interested in methodologies because violence is something that raises issues of pain, loss, fear, terror. Normal social scientific research methods cannot always capture that dimension, nor can they necessarily generate really good data information on violence because, of course, people are not very willing often to talk about what they've experienced or find it difficult to express themselves in normal ways. We also used more visual methods, methods such as participatory theatre and video, which would help people to articulate experiences in new ways.
Participatory video is a method for turning ordinary citizens into researchers. It gives them control of the video camera and allows them to discover their own knowledge. The videos produced can be used for reflection and discussion. In this process, participants identify problems and their solutions, and are empowered to share these discoveries with decision makers. In the Kaduna, Kano, and Plateau states in Nigeria, the researchers combined participatory video with public theater. They call this approach methodological conversations.
Participatory video was used as a way of framing the issues in the field. They then filmed what they thought was critical to them in terms of telling the stories about the violence. And those stories, the videos that we bring back, we watched the videos, discussed them, and it was a process of identifying issues, a process of framing their own perceptions and understanding of issues of conflict in their communities. Once that happened, it also began to provide material that the drama would address.
In the Quintungo and Guaporé neighborhoods of Rio de Janeiro, researchers used participatory video as a way to strengthen years of grassroots organizing. Here, the video was one step on a much larger journey to building trust and understanding in a community fractured by violence.
We used participatory video in a sort of light way throughout the research, but then in a concerted way to produce specific films at the end of the research process, by which point there were many months of discussions that had already happened, and the videos provided a way for people to feed in all of those things they'd been thinking about and then to try and consolidate that into some single narratives. So I think it did have a role in helping to consolidate people's thinking. It played a really important role in bridging divisions between different groups of people in the community who don't talk to each other, mainly out of fear, actually, and I think that's a really important effect that violence has, is to erode social fabric within communities and the basis for trust.
In the Guerrero and Chiapas states in Mexico, researchers used participatory video to lead community leaders on a path of self-discovery. Participants reflected on their approach to influencing education, health, and justice.
One of the advantages of the use of video is that let people to open the discussion about a very complex problem. You know, one of the central issues about violence is that a lot of times it is not recognized like violence. It is not accepted like a violent situation. It is like normal. When you live in a quotidian structural violence, you didn't think that it is a violent situation. So to let people to have a reflection, to have a discussion about how their own lives and other people's lives are living the violence is a first possibility to try to change. In our experience, the video has led to show the problem and to let people to understand that that is a problem and that they can act against that.
Participating in research implies a cost of time and emotion. Participatory video is an effective way to ensure that those who are involved feel like their efforts have been worthwhile.
The video provided a project in which lots of different groups were interested in engaging, and it helped to, I don't know if it's a permanent bridge, but it created at least a temporary bridge between different groups in the community. And the videos were something really tangible that people were excited about, that they could have a copy of in their hands at the end of the process. So I think that was another important role the video played.
Video leaves a record that can be shared elsewhere. Participatory video can carry voices into spaces where marginalized groups have previously had no access, sometimes putting them on a national stage.
Situations like this where, with high levels of violence, the public debate about the violence often excludes the perspectives of those who are most at risk and most likely to be victims of violence.
The role of participatory video in this respect is that it captures this community drama and community performance. We then edit the video into a final product, and then it becomes therefore as a documentation of the issues and saying these are issues we need to be talking about. What are the ways forward around that? And we use it with the communities where we worked, with state politicians and local government officials.
We also organized a showing of the videos at a cinema in Rio, and we invited people from the local government and the state government and the federal government and NGOs working on violence, and all the people from the favelas who made the videos came as well. And we showed the videos, and then we had a debate between these different government representatives about what government policy should be towards the favelas on violence. And I think that was a really important moment in the whole process, because the people from the government and the NGOs really were forced to listen and see perspectives on the violence that they would not ordinarily get through the media or through their work.
Participatory video also has risks and limitations, especially within a context of violence. Researchers took great care to understand these and to minimize the risk to those involved.
I mean, it introduces another level of literacy beyond just the normal kind of literacy of reading and writing, because it's a whole new technical literacy that people need to have. And you can teach people the technical skills, but it's still another barrier that's going to exist to people being able to engage. Another important thing is that people don't speak in the same way in front of a camera as they do in other contexts. And there is a process of editing out that goes on, especially when they know that the video is going to be shown to broader audiences. So I feel like you have to be very careful in the way that you use it and in the way that it maps onto other elements of the research process.
The camera and the recording them become public property for the entire community and says, these are our issues, this is the way we talked about them, and we can refer back to this later on. Of course, we know that some of the leadership are not on camera and may not like some of the things that the young people are saying. It could have a backlash in the fact that the images are there, you can't hide it, and so if any of the gatekeepers want to target any of the young people, they can say, you are the one in the forefront of this. That can be a problem. The way we figure that out and how it won't be so much of a problem is the fact that we didn't go around picking individuals that didn't have an organizational base.
So there's a real fixedness to the way to videos. And why that matters is that when you're researching violence, there are issues around anonymity and around risk and around what people can say and what they can't say and to whom. And so if you're using video, that raises a whole set of specific problems. And I don't think that's a reason not to do it, but it's something that needs to be kept in mind. And as I said before, it means that video really, participatory video, while it is a very powerful tool, it needs to be used in combination with other participatory research tools.
I think what we did was tease out an awful lot of problems about researching violence. It's very difficult to talk success, in a way, when you're dealing with experiments in new methodologies in these kinds of contexts. We learned a lot about how difficult it is to get people to talk about violence, but I think that we certainly learned that methodologies that you would not have thought would be relevant and possible in contexts of violence, such as visual methods, such as video, actually do elicit new ways of thinking about the problem, and they do help people to reflect on what they've experienced in ways that also socialise the knowledge about violence. So this is about teasing out what can be learnt in particular ways of using these methodologies. It's certainly not about saying, well, there's one way of researching violence, multiple ways, and let's experiment more in order to confront what is one of the greatest blights humanity faces today.